Hey, I'm Eric. I'm 24, finishing my last semester at university, and somehow I ended up spending spring break in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't the plan. Originally I was supposed to be crashing with my friend Liam at his aunt's lake house, this quiet place tucked deep in the woods with spotty Wi-Fi and that kind of stillness that feels old, like time forgot about it. But 2 days in, Liam had to drive back to the city for a family emergency. Said he'd be gone, a day, maybe two. That was 3 days ago. I offered to leave too, told him I'd head home or grab a cheap motel, but his aunt insisted I stay. Said there was no point driving all the way back when I could just enjoy the quiet. Her name's Melissa. I remembered her from last summer. She came to one of Liam's parties once, brought a casserole and stuck around for maybe 10 minutes before disappearing. She was his dad's younger sister, I think. 42, maybe 43. I didn't really remember what she looked like. But when she opened the door this time, something stopped me. She had this calm, slow way of speaking, like nothing could rush her. Dark sweater sleeves rolled up to her elbows, hair tied up loose, a hint of paint on her hands. She was in the middle of restoring a cabinet when I arrived. "It's no trouble," she said, waving me inside. "You'll keep the fire going, at least." She smiled then, this quiet kind of smile that made me feel noticed. Like she was really looking at me. Not in a weird way. Just present. I hadn't been around anyone like that in a while. The first couple nights were uneventful. I stayed in the guest room, read, worked on my thesis. She did her thing in the workshop out back. We shared meals, simple stuff like lentil soup or toast with avocado, and watched old movies in the evenings. Nothing big. But then there were the little things. The way she sat across from me at breakfast and asked thoughtful questions. The way she turned her chair just slightly toward mine when we were watching that old Hitchcock film. Her laugh, low, quiet, almost like she didn't expect to laugh at all. I started noticing her more. The way she pulled her sweater sleeves over her hands when she was cold. The way she smelled faintly like lavender and old books. Her fingers were always smudged with something, charcoal, paint, flour, and there was something oddly grounding about that. And I guess that's where it started. Not all at once. Just, this quiet gravity. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, she was Liam's aunt. Older, sure, but not like someone's grandma. She had this brightness. Sharp eyes, kind but observant. The kind of presence that fills a room without trying. The night Liam called to say he'd be delayed again, we were sitting in the den with the fire going. She had a blanket over her legs, one of those thick woven ones. I had a cup of tea, both hands wrapped around it. "Sorry you're stuck with me," she said lightly, watching the flames. "I could think of worse people to be stuck with," I replied before I even thought about it. She turned her head slowly, eyes meeting mine, and for just a moment, neither of us said anything. It wasn't awkward. But it was full. And I swear the sound of the fire filled all the spaces where a word might have gone. The next morning started like the others, coffee brewing, windows fogged from the cold outside, the wood floor cool under my bare feet. Melissa was already up, hair tied back, sleeves rolled. She was kneading dough at the counter, quiet but not distant. I mumbled a good morning and she looked over her shoulder. "There's more coffee," she said, and nodded toward the French press. I poured a mug, tried not to notice how the light caught the edge of her cheekbone, how calm she looked standing there in that oversized gray sweater and leggings. We didn't talk much that morning. Just the occasional comment about the weather or the birds out by the feeder. It felt peaceful. Still. But also like something was pressing gently against the silence. Later that afternoon, I was sitting on the screened porch reading when she stepped outside, brushing flour from her hands. "I keep meaning to fix that back step," she said, nodding toward where the wood sagged. "But I don't trust myself with a hammer anymore." I stood up without thinking. I can take a look. She gave me a look that was almost amused, but also appreciative. I won't say no, she said. The step wasn't bad, just needed reinforcement. I pulled a couple boards from the shed, and she watched from the porch, arms folded lightly over her chest. At one point she came down and crouched beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of whatever lotion she used, something warm and subtle, like almond and citrus. "You're good with your hands," she said quietly. I looked up. Her face was close, eyes locked on mine. I swallowed. Just been doing this stuff since I was a kid. She didn't say anything back, just watched me for a beat longer than she needed to. That night she made pasta, not from a box, from scratch. The whole kitchen smelled like garlic and butter and something deeper I couldn't name. We ate by the window, soft music playing on her old speaker. The sun had gone down, but the last light still hung on the lake. "You're quieter than most of Liam's friends," she said between bites. "I guess I just like observing. Do you ever say what you're thinking?" I hesitated. "Sometimes." She gave a small smile, folded her napkin in half, then said softly, "I think you think more than you let on." I didn't know what to do with that. So I didn't say anything. Just looked out at the lake. After dinner, she invited me to help her sort old photo albums in the attic, stuff she said she hadn't touched in years. We climbed the creaky stairs, dust thick in the air, and started pulling boxes from the corner. She showed me pictures of Liam as a toddler, of family I didn't recognize. Her laugh was lighter then, like the weight she carried every day had loosened a bit. I held up one picture, her in her 20s, leaning against a car in a leather jacket. "You look kind of dangerous in this one," I said. She laughed. "That was a phase. I don't buy it." She looked at me for a long moment. "Don't believe everything people show you." I nodded, and the silence after that felt closer. Like we were sitting in something bigger than the boxes around us. That night, I went to bed later than usual. Couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way she looked at me in the attic, the warmth in her voice at dinner, the way her fingers brushed mine when we reached for the same photo. It wasn't a flirtation, not really. It was something else. A pull. A quiet electricity. And I knew I was crossing into a place where nothing would be simple anymore. 2 more days passed. Melissa and I settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee. Shared meals. Long silences that never felt empty. We didn't talk about Liam, or when he might return. It was like we were both pretending time had paused. On Thursday evening, it rained. The kind of slow, soaking rain that turns everything gray and still. We stayed in, both of us in the den, the fire casting soft shadows on the walls. She curled up in the armchair with a book. I was on the couch, half listening to the quiet jazz humming from the old speakers. She looked up at one point and said, "I keep forgetting how nice quiet can be when it's shared." I don't know why, but that stuck. Later, after dinner, she asked if I wanted to watch something. I shrugged. Sure. She picked a film I didn't know. Black and white. Slow-moving. Subtle. She handed me a blanket from the linen chest. We sat side by side on the couch, not touching. But close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. About 20 minutes in, she shifted. Pulled the blanket across both our laps. Her arm brushed mine. I told myself it meant nothing. But then, slowly, she leaned her head, gently, barely, against my shoulder. My pulse spiked. I didn't move. She didn't say anything, and I didn't either. The movie kept playing. I couldn't tell you what it was about. Eventually she lifted her head again, turned to look at me, eyes soft. Searching. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That wasn't fair." "It's okay," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant. She was quiet for a moment, like she was trying to decide something. Then she reached out, slowly, and took my hand in hers. Not forcefully. Just placed her fingers around mine, like she was testing the weight of the moment. I haven't touched someone's hand in a long time without feeling guilty, she said, almost like it wasn't meant to be spoken. I squeezed gently. You don't have to feel anything you don't want to. She smiled then, small and worn. A beat passed. Then she leaned in, again, slow, and kissed me. Light. Soft. A single, quiet kiss that felt like breathing after holding your lungs tight for too long. When she pulled back, her eyes were glossy. Not crying. Just full. I'm not sure what this is, she said. I'm not either, I admitted. We didn't say anything else. She stood after a while, murmured something about needing to put away the dishes, and disappeared into the kitchen. I sat there, heart thudding in my chest, staring at the fireplace like it held answers. Later that night, I heard her moving through the hallway outside my door. I didn't open it. I didn't move. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, that kiss replaying again and again. And it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a door had opened. Quiet. Gentle. But open. After that night, everything changed, but not in any obvious way. There was no grand confession. No, what are we doing, conversation. Just a shared look the next morning in the kitchen. A soft morning from her lips, a half smile from mine. And then her hand, as she passed me a mug of coffee, brushing just a second too long against mine. That's how it began. Slowly. She didn't say Liam's name. I didn't ask when he'd be back. We existed in that strange quiet space between denial and truth. And somehow, that made it feel safer. Like the world couldn't find us if we didn't define it. Some days, we barely touched. Just glances across the room. A pause too long at the stove while she stirred soup. A shared breath on the couch. Other days, she'd sit beside me on the porch, the hem of her sweater brushing my jeans. Our legs pressed together, like magnets pretending not to notice the pull. Once, while we watched a storm roll in over the lake, she rested her head on my shoulder and said, I forgot how good this feels. What? This, she whispered. Not pretending I don't want to be near someone. The most intimate moments didn't happen in the bedroom. They happened in the kitchen, passing each other plates. In the hallway, where she once reached up to fix the collar of my shirt and didn't pull her hand away. On the stairs, when I brushed past her too close and she didn't move aside. One afternoon, I walked into the den and found her asleep on the couch, a book fallen across her chest, glasses still on. I stood there for a moment, watching the slow rise and fall of her breathing, her brow just slightly furrowed like she was still carrying something heavy, even in sleep. I sat down quietly in the armchair, not wanting to wake her. Just wanted to be near her. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't even about escape. It was about tenderness. That aching need to be seen and to see someone back. To be allowed into the quiet parts of another person. But there were cracks in the stillness. They showed up in the way she'd glance out the window and frown when she thought I wasn't looking. In the silence that stretched too long after a laugh. In the way she sometimes pulled back, just a little, when I touched her hand. I didn't push. I knew whatever we were building was fragile. One night, we were sitting on the floor of the living room, an old record playing on the turntable, jazz, smoky and slow. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a glass of wine in hand. I was telling her about my mom, how she always planted tulips too early and ended up losing half of them to frost. Melissa laughed, softly, and said, "That sounds like me. Doing things before it's time." I didn't say anything. Then she looked at me and asked, "You're not going to fall in love with me, are you?" Her voice was steady, but something behind it cracked. I wanted to lie. To say no. To say it was just a thing, a moment, something passing. But I couldn't. So I just looked at her and said, I don't know. She looked away, her thumb tracing the rim of her wine glass. Don't, she whispered. Please. I nodded. Okay. We sat in silence for a long time after that. The record kept spinning. The fire crackled low. And I knew, even if I never said it, that I already had. The morning after that conversation, things felt thinner. Like the warmth between us had cooled by a few degrees, and we were both pretending not to notice. We still moved through the house like before, making breakfast, reading, watching old movies, but the pauses grew longer. Her eyes didn't linger the same way. And when I handed her a mug of coffee, our fingers didn't touch. I thought about packing up and leaving. But I didn't. Part of me hoped things would settle back. That maybe it was just a rough moment. A line we'd brushed up against and could step back from. I kept telling myself we hadn't crossed any real lines. But of course we had. Not just the kiss. Not just the touches. It was the silence. The secrecy. The way I now knew how she looked when she first woke up, eyes still soft, voice raspy with sleep. Liam called that afternoon. Said he'd be back the next day. I told Melissa when she came in from the garden, dirt still on her palms. She didn't look surprised. Just nodded and sat down at the table without saying a word. We ate in silence that night. Not tense. Just aware. After dinner, I found her standing by the fireplace, staring into the flames. I should go, I said quietly from the doorway. She turned slowly. Her arms were crossed, but not defensively, more like she was holding herself together. You don't have to, she said. I stepped closer, but not too close. He's your nephew, Melissa. My friend. I know. And I think, I stopped. Swallowed. I think I care about you more than I meant to. She didn't answer right away. Then she looked at me with this tired, honest sadness. I thought I could control it, she whispered. Keep it small. Contained. Just, something to carry me through a lonely week. But it wasn't small, I said. No, she admitted. It wasn't. A long silence fell between us. I don't want this to ruin things for you, she said. Or for Liam. Or even for me, if I'm being honest. I've already let it go too far. You haven't done anything wrong, I said. She smiled faintly. That's kind of you. But we both know better. I wanted to argue. Tell her it meant something. That it mattered. That maybe it was worth the risk. But I didn't. Because in her face, I saw the same realization I was trying not to say aloud. We'd built something real. And that was exactly why it couldn't last. Later that night, she knocked on my door. I opened it to find her standing there, wrapped in that old woven blanket she always used. Her face was unreadable. I wanted to say goodnight, she said. Before everything goes back to the way it was. I nodded. Good night. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, soft, lingering, and then pulled away. I'll leave breakfast out tomorrow. In case I don't see you. Then she turned and walked back down the hall. I stood there a long time after the sound of her footsteps disappeared, the taste of that goodbye still warm on my skin. I left before sunrise. Didn't sleep that night, just laid there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Every creak in the floorboards felt louder than usual. Every rustle of wind through the trees outside felt like something pulling me back. I packed slow. My things didn't take up much space, just a backpack, charger, a half-finished book. I folded the blanket she'd given me to use, placed it at the end of the bed. Tried not to think too hard about what that gesture meant. About what any of it had meant. The kitchen was dark when I passed through. She wasn't up. But she'd left a plate on the counter, just like she said she would. Toast. A small jar of jam. A folded napkin with a note on top. Take care of yourself, Eric. I didn't read it more than once. I just slid it into my pocket and walked out the door. The air was cold, the kind that makes your breath show in little clouds. My car felt unfamiliar, like I hadn't driven in weeks. Maybe I hadn't, really. As I pulled away from the cabin, I looked once in the rearview mirror. The porch light was still on, though the rest of the house was dark. No part of me expected her to come out. That's not how things end in the real world. Back in the city, everything felt louder. Harsher. I moved into a short-term sublet near campus. One window. A desk. Walls thin enough to hear my neighbors fighting or laughing or both. Liam texted a few times. Said thanks again for watching the place. Said his aunt told him I'd been quiet but helpful. I didn't ask for more. He didn't offer. And Melissa never reached out. I didn't expect her to. That wasn't her way. She was the kind of person who lived inside moments but didn't drag them with her. Still, I thought about her. More often than I meant to. Little things pulled her back, a song we'd listened to while cooking dinner, the smell of wood smoke from a fireplace, the way the afternoon light slanted in through the windows in my new place, almost the same as hers. I'd look up sometimes, expecting to see her there. Of course, I never did. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not even my closest friend. Not because I was ashamed, not really, but because saying it out loud would have changed it. Would have made it feel like something that needed explaining. And what we had didn't fit into anyone else's version of the world. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't a mistake. It was something tender and impossible that lived in the space between loneliness and understanding. So I kept it. Private. Quiet. A month passed. Then two. The days got longer. Warmer. I focused on finishing school, on applying for internships, on pretending like I hadn't left a version of myself in that cabin beside a woman who saw me in a way no one else had. I didn't expect to see her again. But life has its own quiet sense of timing. It happened in early summer. I was walking through the weekend market down by the river, one of those slow Saturdays where you're just killing time. I had a coffee in hand, headphones around my neck, trying to figure out if I needed new socks or if I was just avoiding going home. That's when I saw her. She was standing by a table of handmade pottery. Hair down, sunglasses perched on her head. A linen dress, simple and soft. She was talking to the vendor, laughing at something. That same low laugh I hadn't heard in months, but recognized instantly. My first instinct was to turn and disappear into the crowd. I didn't. I just stood there, maybe 15 feet away, waiting for her to turn. When she did, it was slow, like she'd felt me before she saw me. Her eyes found mine, and she froze. Only for a second. Then she smiled. Small. Real. She walked over like we were two people who'd just run into each other at the library, not like we'd shared secrets that still sat in my chest like river stones. Eric, she said softly. Hey, I said. My voice cracked a little. Hi. We stood there for a second too long, and then she gestured toward a nearby bench. Do you have a few minutes? I nodded. We sat. The air between us felt different. Not heavy. Not tense. Just, full of things that didn't need repeating. How's school? She asked. Graduated last week, I said. She smiled. Congratulations. You still up at the lake? She shook her head. No. I only stayed through spring. It was always meant to be temporary. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. She looked at me then, really looked. Like she had in the den that night, right before she asked me not to fall for her. "You look well," she said. "I'm doing okay." A pause. "I've thought about reaching out," she admitted, fingers fiddling with the strap of her bag. "I've thought about that, too," I said. She nodded like that was enough. "I wasn't sure what we were supposed to say," she said after a minute. "Maybe we weren't supposed to say anything. Maybe." The quiet sat between us, warm and strange. The sound of people chatting, kids running past with ice cream, the buzz of a saxophone player on the corner, it all faded behind the stillness. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad. Scribbled something. Tore it out. "It's just a number," she said. "Not a promise." I took it. She stood, gave me one last look, calm, steady, familiar. "I'm glad it was you," she said. And then she walked away. I didn't call that day. I haven't called yet. But the number is still in my wallet, folded next to a napkin I probably should have thrown out months ago. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I pull it out just to hold it. Not to dial it. Just to remember. Because I don't know if we'll ever talk again. I don't know if that quiet moment on the bench was closure, or just another open door. All I know is that what we had was real. Even if no one else ever knows. Even if it never happens again. Even if it only lives here, in memory. In silence. In me.